There it is. So just so you know, it is going to be recorded. So if you would like to refer back at any point in time, it'll be shared out after the presentation. So this is our first of a series of 4 presentations that we are doing for the Long Island region. My name is Amy Bly. Today's topic is the Pathway to New York State 30% Initiative. We will be using the chat function throughout the presentation. It should have already popped up because we have a couple of messages in there already. If you are not familiar with the chat function, you're more than welcome to take yourself off mute, ask for help, or ask one of the presenters how to type in the chat. I'm assuming by this point, most everybody is pretty well aware of it, but if for some reason you're not, please do let us know, because we are going to be using that throughout the presentation. And here is your first prompt for the chat. If you wouldn't mind just adding your name, your school district, and the county that you are located in, that would be wonderful. Okay, so here's a little bit more about us. I introduced myself quickly. I'm going to let Sandy go first here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sandra Menasha. I'm with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County, and I have 2 roles here. I am currently the vegetable and potato specialist with Extension in the Ag program, and also co-coordinator of the Long Island Farm to School Regional Program, along with Amy, who's going to go next.
Thank you, Sandy. Again, my name is Amy Bly. I am also with Cornell Cooperative Extension, Suffolk County. I also have many roles that I play within CCE Suffolk. I am a SNAP Ed senior nutritionist for about the past 6.5 years here with CCE Suffolk, and I'm also the co-coordinator for the Long Island region Farm to School. Miranda?
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Miranda Capriotti. I work for East End Food Institute based in Southampton, and I am the Outreach and Education Manager and also the Farm to School Coordinator for Southampton, Riverhead, Tuckahoe, West Hampton, and Bridgehampton school districts.
Great, thank you. Cheryl, do you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Cheryl Bilinski. I am the program lead for the Farm to School initiative through Harvest New York. Harvest New York is a statewide extension team. We offer support in a handful of other regions as well. So Sandy and Amy are joining us as part of the Harvest team, and we're really excited to partner also with East End Food Institute here. We have coordinators in Hudson Valley, both lower and upper, in Western New York, in North Country, and we are going to be hiring in the next, posting to, and hopefully hiring in the next few months in New York City and Central New York. And so we're able to do this work through the support of the New York State Department of Ag and Markets. They've given us funding to administer the Regional Farm to School Coordinator Program. So we're just slowly adding regions, and Long Island is one of the first that we were able to add. So excited to be with you all today. In addition to the Farm to School work, it actually falls under the local foods umbrella as part of our team. And so I'm a local food systems specialist for the team, and I have been for about 10 years.
Thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl's going to be with us the entire time. She's going to be checking the chat. So if you have any specific questions, one of us will try to get them answered. And if we don't have the answer right off the bat, we will definitely get back to you. Okay, so keep on moving here. So this is the basis of what we are going to cover today. We are going to do just a brief introduction of Harvest New York and East End Food Institute, as well as the 30% initiative. We are lucky enough to have representatives here today from State Ed. They're going to present on how to use the 30% calculator, go through the review, as well as the audit process for you all. So you'll have some chances to ask them questions while we have them on today. We're going to talk a little bit about some different methods to get you to your 30%, things like buying patterns, strategies that other districts have used to reach their goal of spending the 30% on New York food products. Then we're going to go through some examples of tracking and documentation as you go to make that application and audit process a bit easier for you. And then at the end, we will leave some time for Q&A. You don't have to wait till the end though. However, if you have any questions, just pop them right in the chat as we're going. And like I said, one of us will try to get you an answer. Okay. So here is our brief overview of Harvest New York. These are just some of the goals that we have for the program. Like Cheryl mentioned, it is a statewide program. We have had great success in other parts of the state. We're hoping to bring that here to Long Island as well. So really what we are trying to do, what we aim to do for you all is to provide direct support with food products, procurement, developing resources, offering trainings. This is the first of hopefully some more trainings that we're able to offer you all here. Hopefully we'll be in person at some point. That would be great. We are working collectively with a whole network of people. So we do have some institutional knowledge that we are able to tap into, which is great. We can help you individually with procuring local products, etc. And we're also working locally to connect with additional vendors and distributors for you all. Moving right along. So like I mentioned, we are really providing support to you all. We are hoping to find local food and farm partners to connect with you all and to hopefully be able to bring some more of that great foods into your schools. We are trying to work with our supply chain partners on the logistics of things, especially delivery. We know that's a big issue, so that's something we'd love to help with. Developing local food procurement plans, assisting you all with your bid development, things like using geographic preference, etc. Establish a farm to school promotional campaign if you're not already doing things like that, like our New York Thursdays or our Harvest of the Month program. We can also assist you with securing grants to expand a farm to school program or programming that you're currently doing. And last but not least, support you in that tracking and documentation for the 30% requirement. Okay, Miranda, this is you.
All right, thanks, Amy. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Easton Food Institute. For those of you who aren't familiar, we are an aggregator, processor, and distributor of local foods on the East End of Long Island. We're a nonprofit, and we work with farmers and food producers to create a more sustainable and equitable food system here on the East End. We do this through a number of programs, which include Farm to School, which is sort of my jurisdiction. I'm the Farm to School coordinator for the 5 school districts I mentioned at the intro. We also have a Farm to Institution program where we distribute fresh and minimally processed produce to senior centers and food pantries throughout the East End. We have a farmers market. We just actually last weekend opened the East End Food Market in Riverhead with over 40 local vendors. And the market accepts SNAP and Double Up food bucks. And we also operate a virtual farmers market, which you will hear a little bit more about later, where producers can sell direct to consumer or through our wholesale network. And so this virtual platform is also the system that we've used to integrate local food procurement for our 5 school districts. Easton Food Institute also does value-added processing for local farmers and producers to create their own line of products in addition to our own line of products. And we have a shared commercial kitchen for small producers in need of a licensed space to produce their goods. So a little bit of everything. And we already work with many of you who are on the call. So yeah, I'm excited to tell you more as we go on.
Thanks, Miranda. Hi. So just a little bit of background on the 30% initiative. Back in 2018, our former governor, Andrew Cuomo, had launched the No Student Goes Hungry initiative. So FSAs, sorry, question or just no? I think someone was just off mute.
And how are you doing?
If everyone can just do me a big favor, unless you're asking a question, if we could stay on mute, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so in 2018, that was launched, and the initiative is basically where if SFAs spend 30% of their total food costs for lunch on New York State food items, there was an increase in their meal reimbursement of 19 cents. So bringing that up to 25 cents a meal. Just real brief overview of the initiative itself. Okay, so there is a little bit of confusion sometimes about what a New York State food product is. Some people think that it includes any product that's been processed in New York. However, that's not typically true for this program. So we're talking things that are whole or minimally processed foods, and they have to be processed in New York. If they are processed in or out of the state, they have to have at least 51% of raw New York produce foods. Sorry, product produce, the words are very similar. So I hope that made sense to everyone. If anyone still has existing confusion about the New York food product rule for this initiative, do please let us know in the chat.
Amy, let me just chime in real quick. It's Cheryl. Okay. It doesn't have to be processed inside. It says inside or outside, but you said processed inside. And that is one thing that's been confusing in the past by distributors because there was previously another buy local campaign that did include items that were just processed in New York, but this one most importantly has that tie back to agriculture, so raw inputs. I just wanted to clarify that because the distributors, they themselves tend to be confused. And so there's been a lot of incorrect information going around about this. And yeah, so I'm sorry, I wanted to confirm that. It doesn't matter where it's processed. It has to be 51% New York grown by weight or volume.
Thank you, Cheryl. I probably stumbled over that little tidbit.
No, it's because every buy local campaign has looked a little different in the past, but this one is specifically to the source of agriculture.
Okay, all right. So moving forward, this is just a graph that was taken from a study that was done of districts that have successfully applied for the 30% and have actually achieved it. So if you take a look at the map itself, there are a couple different color little dots on here. You can see it's representing two different school years. So school year 18-19, school year 19-20, and then the little green diamonds is actually where there were already, there's some support from farm to school coordinators already. So you can kind of see that the successful districts were kind of clustered around where there's already existing support. There were 49 districts that applied for the 2020-2021 school year. They're their under stated review, so they're not on this map yet. If you could take a look at the lower portion of the state, there's nothing there currently. But now Sandy and I and Miranda are all here to help. So hopefully we'll be able to add some dots to our region relatively soon. We did have a big barrier with the lack of access to New York dairy. So that was a big reason in the past, as you are most aware of, I would assume most of you are aware of, that this should be changing in the future. So hopefully, like I said, with our support and the change in dairy, we can add some dots to the Long Island region as well. We are going to talk a little bit more specifically about dairy later on. Okay. So here's one of those questions I'd like you to add some feedback in the chat. So how can we help you get to the 30%? So we'd really like to know specifically the items that you need help with So if you could just take a minute and dump some of that in the chat. We're going to collect the responses. We'll take a look at them later. These responses can also help us tailor additional trainings that we could offer in the future, as well as, you know, tailor individual support for what you guys specifically need. So I see some coming in. Okay, thank you. Keep them coming. We're very interested on your feedback, so. So 29.9% isn't enough. You have to achieve at least the 30% of total lunch purchases to be eligible for the reimbursement. If you're close, but you're not going for the 30%, you are leaving funds on the table. Okay, but you might be closer than you think, right? So we can help you and support you in the process from start to finish if you feel, or if you think that you're close to the 30%. And again, like I mentioned, the dairy, with the addition of dairy, that's really, really going to help us out in our region. Okay. All right, so getting started. This is just a quick overview of the steps when you're considering applying for the 30%. Like I mentioned on the previous slide, you might be closer than you think. So what you want to do is just kind of calculate the 30% expenditure for your district, kind of determine what you're already doing, determine that baseline. Then you're going to just want to calculate the number, your dollar amount for lunch expenditures after you have the number. Then look at what you're already purchasing and, you know, then strategically plan what you're buying and bidding to add some more of those New York food products. And kind of once you get there, then really it's all about tracking and documentation. And you want to try to do that as you go, because it's going to make it a whole heck of a lot easier to track as you go, rather than try to go back and look at everything. And tracking and documentation is a big thing that we are able to help you with. Okay. Okay, so now we are lucky enough, like I said, to have some state ad representatives here on the call with us today. They are going to take over for about 20 minutes or so. They're going to go over the 30% calculator that's going to help you achieve your target number. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to them and then we'll be back.
All right, thank you. So I'm just going to take a minute and share our screen. All right, so you should be able to see our PowerPoint. Can you see it? Yeah, okay. All right, so hi everyone, my name is Cheryl Webster, and I'm here today with Michele Beaver. We both work at State Ed in the Child Nutrition Office. And we both lead special teams, and we're responsible for heading up the 30%. So we develop and update guidance. We review and approve the applications that come in. So if you have questions, you know, as you go through this process, we're always here. We'll share our contact information in the chat box. If you have a question, feel free to email us. I'm going to start by going over the 30% calculation tool. And then Michele is going to go over the review process. So for this initiative, SFAs are required to purchase at least 30% of their total food costs for lunches in the preceding year. So because the initiative is based just on your purchases for lunch, this tool was developed, this calculation was developed to figure out what your lunch costs are. Because we know that schools are not, or most commonly are not, separating your breakfast costs from your lunch costs. So this calculation tool is an Excel document that you can use to plug your numbers in to get an idea of how much you have to spend in New York Foods to qualify for the initiative. So this calculation is the only calculation that you can use to determine what your 30% of your food costs are. So if you have any questions after we go over everything, again, just let us know. You can type it in the chat box or email, give us a call. One more. Okay. So the calculation tool is broken up into 4 different steps. And the first step is to calculate what the total food cost percentage is. So in this step 1, in the top of the calculator, SFAs will report their total annual food costs and their total annual revenue. And so the total food cost divided by the total revenue will determine what the SFA's food cost percentage is. That's the first step, is to determine what that food cost percentage is. The second step, down where it says lunches, this is where we figure out what the income from only reimbursable lunches is. So in this section, SFAs will enter the reimbursement, federal and state reimbursement, that you receive from lunch meals only. And then you also enter the income from the sale of reimbursable meals. So this would be your paid lunch meals that you're receiving money from a student for. Then the third step is to calculate what the food costs for lunch are. So this step right here is what we take 30% of. And so the food cost, the step 3, is calculated by applying the food cost percentage that we calculated in step 1 to your lunch revenue. So the income from step 2 is multiplied by your food cost percentage, and that gives us what your lunch costs are. And then for the final step, step 4, you take 30% of the number you calculated in step 3, and that'll be the amount that you have to spend on New York State foods in order to qualify for the initiative. So now that we have gone through the calculation, we're going to talk just a little bit about what goes into each step. So up at the top there under step 1, where it's asking for total annual food costs, this is going to be the cost of all food that you purchase for all of your programs. So for breakfast, lunch, snack, for the seamless summer option if you're participating in that, summer food service program, your a la carte food, adult meals, catering, all the food that you purchase from July 1 to June 30th will go in that box, except for the value of your USDA commodity foods. So the commodity foods are provided to you by entitlement money at no cost to the SFA, and so they are not allowed to be included in that food cost box. For your federal and state reimbursement, this is the total amount of reimbursement that your SFA receives from all of the child nutrition programs that you participate in. So for lunch, breakfast, snack, summer food service program, and the milk program. And this is your total annual reimbursement. So it's the total amount you receive from July 1 to June 30th will go in that box. And we also, in our child nutrition management system, if you're set up as a user, you can access this information under the payments tab in CNMS. So you can go in and see, you can query by month, you can do a full year to figure out what that reimbursement amount is to be entered into this tool. For the total annual sales, this will be the amount of revenue you receive from the sale of all foods, including breakfast, lunch, snacks, summer food, a la carte, adult meals. So it's the total amount that you receive for all of your sales. And then there's an other box, and this will include any other revenue that your SFA receives, so to the nonprofit food service account. We have some SFAs that receive BOCES aid to the school lunch account or a general fund transfer. All of that additional revenue would go in that other box. So then all of those boxes are added up to that total annual revenue for the entire year. For the next section, where we talk specifically about lunches, you're going to enter your total federal and state lunch reimbursement here, and this is specific to lunch only. So again, in CNMS, you can query your payments based on the program. So you can specifically select lunch to figure out how much you were paid in that year for just reimbursable lunch meals. And so that's the amount that you're going to enter into this next section, school lunch reimbursement. The last figure that we have to enter is the reimbursable school lunch sales. So again, this would be any money that you're receiving for a paid reimbursable lunch from a paid student. This year, if your SFA is participating in the seamless summer option, you're not charging for meals. So this year, that amount will be zero. But in a traditional year where you're charging for paid meals, that's where you would put any money you receive from a student for a paid meal would go in that school lunch sales box. So then after all of those fields have been completed, step 4 automatically calculates, and then this is the amount that you have to spend in New York State food products to qualify for the initiative. So that's the calculation tool, a very quick, brief overview. But again, if you have any questions as you go to enter those numbers in, Michelle and I are always available to help you out or answer any questions you have. Okay, oh, sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to just go over the review process and the document review. All SFAs wishing to receive the additional reimbursement should expect an off-site and/or on-site review of the documentation by us, just to ensure the integrity in the initiative. Due to the public health emergency this year, we're going to do all reviews off-site. It's expected that all SFAs applying for the initiative have supporting documentation available at the time their application is submitted. Upon request, SFAs are required to make all accounts and records pertaining to a school food service immediately available to USDA, SED, or any other authorized entity for the audit of review. SED will review all SFAs that have applied for the initiative unless they were previously reviewed in the last 2 years. When SFAs apply, they'll send some documentation to us for a preliminary review. During the review, SED will request supporting documentation for the 30% initiative and will provide guidance and technical assistance throughout the review process. The documentation that will be requested for the preliminary review may include the list of New York State items, food invoices, New York State documentation for each item, a sample of production records, process on how the SFA separated out breakfast costs, including backup documentation, documentation of revenue and expenses, and list of New York State, New York products purchased for the initiative with a total dollar amount for each item. We also may ask for product formulation statements or New York State grown certified vendor information. And, okay. Once the SFA is approved, the SFA will be contacted to set up a review date where we're going to ask for more documentation for a more in-depth review. Some of the documentation we may ask for is the total annual food cost, total annual sales, CACFP reimbursement if applicable, total annual reimbursement school lunch sales, and total food costs for lunch for New York State. We may also ask for procurement documentation, including the solicitation, contracts, and price lists, purchase orders and invoices or receipts for New York State purchases. We may also ask for menus and a selection of production records for lunch, and any other documentation associated with the 30% initiative that we may need to validate the information submitted. So that's basically our, a review process. We know that it's a little confusing at first if you haven't been through this before, but we have a, let me just put up our information. We have an email that you can email us if you have any questions, or you can give us a call. Ask for anybody in the special teams. They can help you. Me and Tara can help you. We know it's confusing, so like I said, don't hesitate to contact us because we can kind of walk you through the process if you need it. And we know it's really confusing in the beginning, so we don't mind helping you. Thank you. I don't know if we have any questions yet.
Thank you
Can you come
both.
up?
Now's your chance, everyone. If you have any specific questions for them, we have them here. Like she said, though, I hope everybody got their contact information down. If not, this was all recorded, so you can get it at another time. You can ask us for it as well. But feel free, any questions, take a minute, get them in there, and then we'll get going again. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat yet. If something pops into your head, again, please at any point in time, just, put it in there. We'll try to get an answer to you as quickly as we can. But in the meantime, we will, oh, wait, what's in the chat? Yeah.
So Amy, the way I interpret this question, I think, is the 2-year review. So Tara and Michelle, can you just confirm the initial materials have to be submitted by all schools, right? So that cover sheet and the kind of that first pass, but that full scale review is only done if a school hasn't been reviewed in the past 2 years. So it's a 2-step process.
Yeah, so the information you have to submit every year. You do have to give us the information for that preliminary review. And as long as everything in that preliminary review looks okay and we think that you have enough information to be approved, at that point we would approve you. If you already had the in-depth review in the previous year or the year before, we wouldn't do that in-depth review over. So hope that explains it. I don't know.
Maureen, did that answer your question? You just throw a yes in the chat. Okay, perfect. Great, thank you. And there was another question. Are the schools getting the 30% BOCES schools?
Maybe clarify that just a bit. There have been, there's been a few successful BOCES. There's been 3 so far. So Broome-Tioga BOCES, which has 15 component schools, GST BOCES, which has 20, and then Oneida Herkimer Madison, which is 1 SFA, but I think they have 15 schools, but they serve as the SFA for all of them. So I don't know if that answers that question at all, but that is the BOCES so far that we've seen 30% success from.
And then we have a question about our milk. Here we go. Oh, we have some more questions. Good. Okay, so the milk question is, we haven't yet received a document certifying that our milk is from New York State. This is something we will need, correct? Or because our milk is purchased through OGS, is that sufficient?
Reagan, I can answer that. There is a team of folks working on the milk documentation right now for Creamaland. We don't have any reason to think that it's not going to be sufficient. They're buying from a milk cooperative that is comprised of just New York farms. They are trying to go through the New York Grown and Certified process. That process takes a little bit of time. So the quick answer is we don't have it yet. The long answer is I don't see any reason why it's not going to come through. But Tara and Michelle, maybe you want to answer the part whether or not that layer of certification is required if it's purchased through OGS. Like off of the OGS bed, I'm sorry.
Yeah, any product that you're counting as a New York State food product does have to have that documentation to support that it meets the definition. So even if you're purchasing off the OGS contract, you do need it to either be New York Grown and Certified or a valid product formulation statement.
There's a few more questions in here. Do you or have you seen more challenges in reaching the 30% for FSAs using FSMC?
Food service management company. We haven't seen any successful yet, Sharon. I think that came from you. There just haven't been any that have applied. Kind of candidly, we've tried working with a few schools. I think it adds a few more layers of complication. working through a food service management company, but none have applied to date.
Okay, we have a couple more things in here. On the 30% calculation tool, we are using the previous year's numbers for food costs, etc. Correct. When do we apply for the 30%? What is the deadline each year? Okay. So yes, you are using the previous years, and oh, go ahead, Michelle. You can go ahead.
Sorry, I thought that was for us. Yes, you're going to be using the previous year's numbers for the food costs and to put that information in. And as far as applying for the 30%, August 15th each year, the applications have to be in. And then once we get all those applications in, we will probably be reaching out to you to either get more information or to ask questions on our team before we approve them.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Ooh, is there something else in there? Oh, just a thanks. Okay. I get kind of excited when I think there's more questions. Anyway, all right, great. Thank you guys. I'm excited you actually did ask some of your questions. That's wonderful. All right, so just a big thank you again. We'll get going. Okay.
Amy, too, I'll just mention that we'll follow up with a list of resources after this. There are, aside from the fact that there's dedicated coordinators to help with the tracking and the 30% calculator, well, the calculator is really state ed. We have them to help us with that, but there's good documentation that's already out there on the documentation that's necessary. So state ed put out a great tool. We've put out some tools as well, and we know it pretty well. So don't let the paperwork get you down. It's feasible to attain it. It's just better to start early rather than try to collect it later. But we'll send those links out.
Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, so these are just some key takeaways from successful FSEs from the first couple of years. You guys can take a look. Dairy and apple purchases were 2/3 of all of the New York food product expenditures. So that's roughly about 20% of the spending there. There were some schools who got there with just dairy alone, almost got there, excuse me, not got there, almost got there with dairy alone. You know, that makes up a huge portion of your New York food product purchases, depending on your other purchasing patterns, etc. So the gap ranges typically from about 8% to 12%. So you're not really starting from scratch. I'm gonna try to remind you guys of that all the time. You're already doing some of this. You know, so you're closing a much smaller gap than you're probably really realizing. Okay, so this slide just shows us 4 different ways, unique pathways that individual FSAs took to achieve the 30%. So if you take a look, they are broken down by meal component. The blue section on each of these is dairy.
The blue section on each of these is dairy.
I'm repeating myself. That's interesting. So yeah, if you take a look, the dairy in each of them is very high. And again, this is just to let you all know that there's no one size fits all approach. You can mix and match components, whatever's going to work best for, you know, how you menu, what you have access to, etc. So if you take a look at the second example, that one was high protein. The protein options are typically a little bit more expensive to begin with. So there's our second example. The third example, again, it's a lot of dairy. And then our last example there is high produce, high fruits and vegetables. I did glaze over number 1, sorry. The first example was high in fruit. But again, like we've mentioned multiple times about dairy, the only thing that all 4 of these had in common was that they were all high in New York State dairy purchases. Okay. Okay, so Miranda, you are up.
All right, thank you, Amy. Hi again, everybody. So I'm going to use my time to review New York State products and specifically what's available on Long Island to assist you with procurement and how you can integrate these foods into your menus. So this information is constantly changing and you all are the experts on purchasing food products. So I will definitely be deferring to you to share some more information on where you're sourcing your food, which will help us have a better picture of what procurement looks like on Long Island. So first, we will look at this overview of total food purchases by schools who have achieved the 30%. We've broken it down by category because it illustrates the dramatic range of purchases and the multiple pathways to making it to 30%, as Amy was saying in the previous slide. The middle column here, which is circled, shows the range of what was spent broken down by meal component. And so the key takeaways here are that you can get to 30% without all 5 of the components. Some of the SFAs that this data is from spent as much as 80% of their total New York State food product expenditures on dairy, but some spent less than 30%. And this range is repeated in all the categories. So fruit can be anywhere from 0 to 30%. Vegetables is typically around 1 to 30%, and then a small amount of grains up to 2% because not as much is available in New York State. Next slide, please. These are the most frequently purchased items across all SFAs that achieved 30%. Again, we will say this again, milk is the largest expense. But some of these may be potentially easy substitutions for you to make, or maybe just have them become a monthly feature of a New York State item on your menu through programs like Harvest of the Month or New York Thursdays or any other local food celebration. If you recall on the previous slide, fruit accounted for an average of about 18% of total New York food purchases. And the grape and apple products accounted for the majority of those fruit purchases. So that's demonstrated here because you see that milk is number 1, and then grape juice and apple is 2 and 3. Lastly, I'll just point out that 2 animal-based protein items are in the top 10 list here. And they're both beef products. And we will talk a little bit more about this later on, about incorporating New York State protein into your menus. Some of these food items you may have on your menu already, and we can help you find ways to switch them out for a New York State product if it's available and if it's feasible for your school food service model. Next slide. Okay, taking a look at procurement methods. The key takeaway here is that there are many tools available to you to help you achieve the 30%. This data is from food service directors that achieved the 30%, and we asked them which procurement methods they used to purchase New York State food products. As you can see, 71% of them used micro purchases. And they said that that was the most helpful tool to them. So that's like small scale purchases from your area farms. Just over 50% use geographic preference in their bid language. And if that's not something that you are entirely familiar with, we will have a training on that in the coming weeks. So be sure to look out for that if you haven't already registered. And then let's see. 47% aggregated their orders with other SFAs to take advantage of order minimums or lower prices when you're buying in quantity. But what the most important thing to remember here is that almost all used more than one of these methods to achieve the 30%. So try to use as many as you can to help with your purchasing. Don't rely on just one of them. Next slide. All right, so kind of step one in this process is determining your baseline. So once you've, well, kind of step two, I guess, once you've established your 30% goal or dollar amount, you need to see how close you are and decide how to move forward. So what you're going to do is you add up how much you spend currently on New York State products. And for, well, this is tricky. I was going to say it's a good idea to start with dairy, but since Long Island dairy is not a sure thing yet, start with the product that you know is purchased in high quantity of New York State. And then once you've determined your big ticket New York State items, start creating a plan to see what else you need to get to 30%. Next slide. So we want to learn more about what kind of dairy products you're using to help us figure out ways that we can better serve you all. So I know that so much remains up in the air with the Creamoland bid, but I think at this point, it's still really helpful to move forward with the hopes that it will come through. As Cheryl said, it sounds like it's we're getting closer, hopefully every day. And at the end of the day, even if you aren't able to achieve the 30% because of milk, it will still be helpful to get all of the pieces in line should that bid or something else come through. So to help us determine the best course forward in procuring dairy products, if you could just drop in the chat what kind of dairy products you're currently using. I would imagine it's a lot of fluid milk, but anything else, that way we can take a look at New York State producers and how we can get them to Long Island, or if they're already out here. Let's see, I'm just going to take a quick peek at the chat here. Regan says yogurt, cheese sticks, although many times the products have been shorted, unavailable. Naeem says cheese, yogurt, and milk. That's what we suspected, and that's what some of the data from the other SFAs said as well. And Naeem says yes, same to shortages.
Can I ask a question, Miranda? I'm wondering, I put it in chat, but do you think there are COVID supply chain shortages, or has this just been going on pre-COVID? I'm just curious. If anyone wants to answer in chat, I would just be curious if that's, again, a COVID thing, or if that's like a Long Island farm to school thing.
Good question. Regan says, not sure, they just tell us it's not available. And some say COVID seems to be the driver. Okay, thank you all, that's really helpful. All right, Amy, if you could go to the next slide. Okay, so we're gonna start looking at New York food products by meal component. So we'll start with dairy. And this is a chart showing the overview of dairy items purchased by SFAs, similar to some of the graphs that Amy was showing earlier. So dairy is obviously a key component, and this chart shows the breakdown of expenditures for various dairy products for schools that achieve 30%. 83% of all the dairy purchases were fluid milk. And just to reiterate, as we've said before, should the Creamoland bid come through, you might be really close to the 30% with just your fluid milk purchases. Cheese was another big component at roughly 6%. And then the other dairy items include sour cream, cottage cheese, though I know that these are used less frequently. So as we move forward, I'm going to talk more about how to incorporate different New York products into your menu and planning so that we can find a way to subsidize the dairy use in your cafeteria. All right, next slide. Okay, so finding and incorporating local foods. This is a brief list of strategies on how to do that. And we're going to dive a little deeper into each of them over the next few slides. So the first one being the Cornell's 30% database, which I highly recommend that you use as a reference or guide when searching for New York State products. Sandy's going to dive into that a little deeper on the next slide, so I won't say too much on it right now. Product substitutions is another important method, which is fairly straightforward, like substituting your apples that you're serving with New York State apples. New York State apples you can typically get year round, so if you're not already doing this, that's a really easy substitution that you can make. You can incorporate high cost items as a feature instead of a regularly served item. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, but just highlighting it as a New York Thursday item or a local food celebration rather than having it on your menu every day. Then blending commodity foods with New York foods. This trick really comes in handy for managing costs for high price items like protein or grain products. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, but you can mix your commodity foods with New York foods to make like a meatball or something like that. So let's see, on this next slide here, I'm going to pass it to Sandy because she is going to explain Cornell's 30% database. So take it away, Sandy.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. So this here is the 30% New York eligible database. It was developed by Harvest New York. This is just a screenshot of it. Cheryl just dropped the link to that database in the chat. So if you are not familiar with it, I suggest maybe after this call to maybe click on the link and go through it. It really has some great information on there that folks have worked hard to put together, and it's still in development. So with this 30% database, you can search by product, you can search by vendor, by region, or food component. So let's say you are looking at a specific vendor to see what kind of New York products they carry. You can do that through this database. Also, everything in this database has the documentation you'll need to submit to state ed to support that it is a New York product. So you're either going to have those product formulation statements that are required, or you're going to have the New York State Grown and Certified certificate accompanying that specific product in this database. Like I said, we are really working to add more products that are locally available. So if you know of a New York State product that is not on here and want to add it, let us know. And Miranda, Amy, and I are going to be working behind the scenes with a lot of the local vendors and distributors that Long Island schools are currently using to see how we can bulk up the Long Island component of this database. Right now, it is fairly weak because of we haven't had coordinators here in the region before, and you know, technically the 30% was really out of our reach because we didn't have New York State milk. So now that those two components are in place, we can hopefully really bulk up this database for you guys. Okay, Miranda.
All right, thanks, Sandy. Okay, we're going to take a quick look at some other methods you can use to incorporate local food purchases by taking a closer look at the various meal components. So these are some easy substitutions you can make with components you regularly use. And remember, these substitutions do not have to be permanent menu changes, but maybe something that you feature once a month. Or for a local food celebration. So it's important to note also that the products listed here offered by these vendors are New York State, but be sure to check with the vendors to make sure that the product that you are sourcing is a New York State product, because not everything in their product line may qualify. So for some examples, cheese, Great Lakes Cheese Company, Cabot, and Upstate Farms all offer New York State cheeses. For beans, Genesee Valley has a dry bean, not a canned bean, but a dry one. And I think we're still working on distribution to Long Island with that product, if I'm not mistaken. Applesauce, Mott's, and Zzz's both have New York State applesauce. For juice, you can find a New York State grape juice through Welch's. And produce, pretty unlimited here. We grow a lot of produce on Long Island, so you can find any fresh or minimally processed produce. And we definitely recommend that you try to incorporate the fresh produce in the beginning of the beginning and the ending of the school year during the growing seasons. So if you're able to, try to purchase fresh at the beginning and end of school year. The key here is to use your budget on these higher cost local sources and saving your pilot and DoD money for the winter when it's harder to source locally grown fresh produce. Next slide. All right, taking a look at New York State dairy, since that's usually the biggest ticket item. These are some vendors that supply New York State dairy, and please, if you know of any more, just feel free to drop it in the chat. This would be great for, you know, to help us kind of build a better picture of what's happening on Long Island. So for fluid milk, we have Hudson Valley Fresh and hopefully Creamaland. We recently did a tasting of Hudson Valley Fresh at Southampton Elementary School, and they are interested in exploring the feature model with some interested school districts, because they are not able to fulfill the full OGS bid. But if there's a way that you can feature them on your menus, they would definitely be interested in looking into that. There's also Midland. So for yogurt, we have Chobani, Upstate, and Hudson Valley Fresh again has a yogurt. Cheese, Great Lakes, Cabot, Upstate, Catapano, and Mecox Bay. Sour cream, Upstate and Hudson Valley Fresh, and ice cream, we have Perry's. So some of these vendors like Catapano and Mecox, which are located on the North and South Forks, they will be higher priced items and likely better to be featured as a special New York State item that you have once a month or once a quarter or something like that, rather than regularly putting them on your menu. And again, not the entire product line for all of these vendors may qualify, so be sure that you check what you're ordering and make sure that it is a New York State product. Next slide. These are the distributors that we are aware of providing New York State dairy to Long Island. So we have Ace Indico, Cisco, H. Schreier, and Milvila. If you know of any others, please drop them in the chat now, because again, just helps us find out where the milk is coming from. All right, next slide. Moving on to protein foods. So New York State protein is generally a higher price point, especially compared to what you're purchasing currently. But there are hot dogs, beef, chicken, and dried beans all available. And so it really just depends on your ability to process these items, your budget, and your willingness to take this on. So we are currently in conversation with chicken suppliers, and there are a few up in the Hudson Valley area already supplying to schools. So maybe there's a way that we can piggyback off what they're doing up there. And obviously price is a major consideration, but if it wasn't a concern, it's really helpful for us to know what kind of chicken products you would be interested in sourcing should we be able to find a New York State chicken. So if you want to drop that in the chat right now, we can kind of gather some information on what kind of chicken you are looking for. Yeah, like whole, raw pieces, pre-cooked. Great, getting some answers coming through. Breaded chicken, pre-cooked chicken, white meat. Great, thank you. Feel free to keep dropping that in there, and we'll just keep moving on. Next slide, Amy. All right. Because protein always comes at a higher price point, or at least typically does, especially compared to $0 for commodity proteins. This is an average price per pound for New York State protein foods, like burger patties, hot dogs, ground beef, chicken products, tofu, and beans. I realize that this may not work for all of you in terms of budget, but there are some strategies that we can assist you with to offset the higher cost. So again, I've said this so many times, but I'll say it again, using it as a feature. And work with your farm to school coordinator or Cornell Extension or other key stakeholders to come to your school that day to promote it. If you can rope in some teachers to do some promotion in the classroom too, that's even better. Just anything to get the kids to try it. And then you can also combine with commodity foods to manage the overall price. So I mentioned this earlier, but if you have ground beef, for example, you can use your slate ground beef from New York State and blend it with a little less than half of your commodity ground beef to make a New York State menu item. So that might be something to consider if you're looking for a way of adding a New York State protein to your menu. Next slide. To the best of our knowledge, right now the OGS Downstate Warehouse via Slate Foods is the only distributor of beef products on Long Island. If you know of any other protein distributors, please feel free to drop them in the chat. All right, moving on to New York State fruit. So there is juice, apples, and applesauce, all widely available year-round. And this is a good opportunity to use your small or micro purchase powers here to get these local New York State fruit products. There are a ton of other fresh fruit available, particularly during the growing seasons at the beginning and the ending of the school year. So definitely encourage you to spend your money kind of at the beginning and the end of the school year and save your other dollars for in the winter months during the non-growing season. There are New York State juices available, as I mentioned earlier, Welch's, and then Red Jacket also makes one too, which is a little bit more expensive. Mott's and Zzz's both make a New York State applesauce. And I think that's it here. Next slide. Okay. For New York State distribution, we have Jerry Schulman, and I think Diane Schulman's on the call right now, so thank you for joining us. Cisco, Baldor, and I've also included East End Food Institute here. We operate similar to a food hub and aggregate local produce, which we then make available via a wholesale catalog on our online farmers market. We only serve the 5 towns on the East End currently, but delivery outside of this area would be considered on a case-by-case basis. The key here is to think about how you're spending your pilot and DoD dollars and saving them for your out-of-state purchases. Next slide. Vegetables, very similar here to fruit. Again, this is an opportunity to do smaller micro purchases from local farms. And so we have Jerry Schulman, Satter, Baldor, Peters Fruit, and Easton Food Institute again. On the East End, we're hoping to work with vendors like Schmitz to clearly indicate which products are New York State on both price lists and invoices. That can get really tricky when there's not information on where the products are coming from. So that is definitely something that as farm to school coordinators, we're working on the back end to help us all out a little bit. And then I believe a survey was sent out to you all, and from the results, Millvilla, ACE, and H. Schreier are also ones that many of you use, but it's not clear which of their products are New York State, so that's something that we are investigating as well. If you work with any other vendors or distributors, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we're happy to look into it a little bit more. Next slide. All right, New York State grain foods. There are not many of them, and they are a little pricey, but what is available are granola, pita chips, and pasta. Right now, we cannot get the granola on Long Island, but if there is a large enough interest in it from SFAs, then this is definitely something that we could look into. So Sfoleni it has a new pasta line for schools too. It is a little pricey, and I think the only way that you can order it is if you purchase a whole pallet. So this would be an opportunity for you to aggregate your order with other SFAs if you wanted to get New York State pasta. There isn't much in the way of local or New York State bread available, but this could be an opportunity for a product development with larger bakeries if this is an interest. So if you're really looking to add a New York State dinner roll to your menu, then maybe there's a way that we can work with some Long Island or New York State bakeries to get a New York State product created. And then this is another opportunity for purchases from hyperlocal producers as a featured menu item. We'd also like to know if there were any other grain items that you would be interested in adding to your menu. So if you can think of anything, feel free to drop it in the chat. All right, and I think this about covers our dive into the meal components. I'm going to pass it to Sandy now to tell you a little bit more about New York State products and how to make them work for your menu and budget.
Okay, thanks, Miranda. So now that you guys have an introduction to the list of products, vendors, distributors that are available to you, to successfully incorporate local and New York product, you'll need to be very intentional about your planning, and you'll likely need to make some changes. Try to plan your purchases around New York State foods. Plan your USDA orders around breakfast. Use small purchases and micro purchases that we talked about. You're going to have to change how things are bid. These tools are there to really help you procure more local food. So take advantages of the small purchase and micro purchase options. And also incorporating some geographic preference language in bids to kind of help procure more local products is another option. We talked about aggregating and organizing cooperative bids to bring costs down. So that's another tool that school districts can use to kind of help bid and buy strategically to get more local product into their school. Okay, Amy, next slide. But you know, the big question usually is what about all my entitlement funds? 60% of FSDs changed how they use their entitlement in order to procure more local products. So change is really going to be necessary. You're going to have to look at your purchase practices and see what can be done in order to incorporate those more local products. Try to balance the higher cost of local products with entitlement products. Miranda talked a bit about that with taking some, you know, commodity meat and maybe combining it with some New York State meat. And with some smart planning, we can talk about some of these techniques in a bit more detail. Remember that it's really important to remember that the reimbursement might cover any extra costs incurred. So you are getting a 19 cent increase in your reimbursement when you reach that 30%. So higher costs can be balanced by that. Next slide. So here is just a sample seasonality chart of available products that you can purchase locally at different times of the school year. Luckily on Long Island, we are surrounded by farms, especially in Suffolk County. So try to plan your USDA orders around when New York State food items are available, mostly your local fruits and vegetables. So front and back load your menus with New York State items when they are available. So September, October, November, this is a time where New York product is very available. We have broccoli, cauliflower, cucumbers, tomatoes, kale, other collard greens in these winter months. When we're in the heart of winter, December through April, we don't have as many New York products available. So this might be a time where you're going to want to use your pilot or your DOD funds to purchase vegetables and other fruits. that might not be available locally. And then when you come to May and June, again, you start getting into more local product, lettuce, spinach, strawberries. So this might be a good time to, again, use your funds for purchases there and your entitlement dollars during other times of the year. Keep in mind that things like New York State apples, beets, cabbage, onions, potatoes, they're available year round. So that is something that you can always, again, purchase on occasion or purchase more intentionally during those winter months. It's really going to be important to develop relationships with and meet with farmers before the bid season to work with them and develop planting schedules. It's important for the success both for the farmer and for the school. And we have a lot of connections with our local farmers. A lot of farms are kind of in the backyards of local school districts here, so we can work to set up meet and greets or develop those school to farmer relationships. Okay, next slide. So to keep costs lower, as we talked about before, we want to mix New York products with commodity purchases. So as an example that was given is to take your beef commodity or your ground beef and your commodity beef to make burgers, meatballs, and other meat products. Make chili with beef crumbles and then add all the other ingredients using commodity products. Mix fresh local produce with individually quick frozen produce, excuse me. So broccoli, for example, you can take some fresh broccoli and individually quick frozen broccoli and make a dish that way. Buy USDA when local products are not available. So for example, purchase strawberries in June from a local grower and during the other months from USDA, or buy USDA items not grown in New York, like bananas, citrus. So use those funds for those purchases and keep your school funds for those local purchases. Okay, next slide. If you are looking to buy larger quantities, we talked about aggregating and organizing cooperatively to make purchases. This will take advantage of buying as a group and a bulk, get lower prices. So work with the Long Island Co-op if you don't already, as they aggregate a lot of purchases for schools. If not, there's also BOCES that you can work with cooperatively to organize purchases. Work with your other FSAs to aggregate to purchase by the pallet if there is storage available and bring costs down that way. Craft your bids with a piggyback clause. So this is another procurement tool that you can use. Piggybacking, when you add in that clause, it allows FSAs to purchase off that bid and get that price for that bid. So it's another kind of cooperative type purchase. Okay, next slide. So this is just a plug for our geographic preference workshop that we're going to be hosting December 14th from 1 to 2:30. So if you have not signed up for that, we encourage you guys to do so. We'll cover how to use the specific method in that training. And pretty much geographic preference, it allows for a point system to be put in place on bids, giving points to certain language of, delivering food within 1 day of harvest, things that could give your local vendors, local farmers, a kind of a leg up when they can't really meet the low cost qualification that we're mostly looking for. Okay, next slide. So we don't plan to fail, but we fail to plan. So being prepared and being on top of record keeping is going to be the key to success with this program. Documentation, record keeping, all of that is always so overwhelming, but really if you start tracking from day one, it's going to be a less onerous process. So applications are due in August, as Michelle and Tara mentioned. So start accumulating, tracking your purchases and sales from day one. Keep a folder, as they mentioned, to have all that supporting documentation on hand. You print them out, keep them in a folder, put them on your computer. Keep supporting documents on hand using the 30% database. They have the produce formulation statements that you're looking for to ensure that any processed product is 51% by weight, volume, or actual product is New York State. And then you can also have the New York State grown and certified certificates on hand. So use that 30% database to get those. Enlist me, Amy, or Miranda to assist with any sort of documentation and paperwork that may be needed. We're here to help. We want to make this process easy. We want to take the frustration and overwhelming feeling away as much as possible. So lean on us for help if you need it. Cheryl mentioned earlier that there's some great documents already in place on what you may need to document to reach the 30% initiative. So maybe we can throw in the chat the link to the Harvest New York guidance document on the required documentation that you may need. So there are some things online that can help with this process. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when you submit the application, there has to be the paper trail to show that your products were grown in New York State. If it's unprocessed, that's pretty easy. You can get that information from your distributor or for your farmer invoice. It needs to explicitly state on the invoice the name of the farm or that it is New York State. Terms like local, homegrown, etc. are not acceptable. So we can work with vendors to help make this process easier. So again, lean on us if you are working with a vendor and you're buying a particular product, but you're not sure if it's New York State or not, let us know. We can work with that vendor and get them to list it, because I'm sure if you're purchasing a particular product from that vendor, you may not be the only one, and other FSAs might be looking for that information as well. So again, lean on us and we will help with this process. So if you are looking for documentation for a process item, as you mentioned, or as we mentioned before, it has to have the New York State grown and certified certificate, or it has to have a product formulation statement. Either are fine. Like I said, the database has these forms handy. And if you are getting a process item and you do not have the paperwork for it, we can help track it down or get it made. So reach out, as others probably need this information as well. And we'll put that all in the database so it could be there for everybody to access. Okay, next slide, please. So you need to document your spending, how you're spending your money, and there needs to be an accurate count of your milk. So milk tracking, the best way is production records and the use of a master milk worksheet. We have examples of those if you need them. It sounds complicated, but it's not. There are many people, many successful SFAs already counting and tracking milk, and we can give you some examples of those. The purpose really is to separate milk used for breakfast versus lunch. Remember, anything sold for breakfast is not going to count. So we need to have an estimate, or we need to have a count of what was sold during lunch. An estimate or a percentage is not going to be acceptable. Saying 30% of my milk was used for lunch, that's not going to work. So some schools have added a New York State button on their point of system sales for lunch service as a means of tracking milk. They have folks that are counting milk before and after lunch service to track how much was sold on that particular day. There's other school districts that are counting milk as it goes through the line. So these are just some examples of what some schools have used. Again, we can share any Excel documents that have been used for tracking milk to anybody that's interested, so reach out. The point really is that you must just figure out a system that's going to be best for your particular situation. So you also need to track your monthly spending. And really, this is best done from the beginning. We have templates and spreadsheets to assist with this also. So if you need those, we can definitely share them. By tracking spending from the beginning, you can see monthly where you are with hitting your 30% goal, and then make adjustments as necessary at that time, instead of waiting till the end of the year and realizing, wow, I'm $200 short of reaching that 30% goal. It's going to be much harder to tweak at the last minute, as opposed to trying to tweak as you go through each month, tracking your spending to make sure you're hitting that 30% goal. And that 30% you got from the calculator, so you can know month by month how close you are to hitting that. Okay, next slide. So opportunities and next steps. Harvest New York is going to continue to identify available New York food products in the region through partner distributors, and identify opportunities for new product development and or reformulation. So again, we talked a lot about this. We asked you guys to drop a lot of things in the chat. As you go through, if you think of anything else, please reach out. As I mentioned, we are here to help and take some of the overwhelming feeling of this process off your shoulders as much as we can. Let us know what products you wish you could get that you aren't getting. We are also looking to identify potential farmer and food service director meet and greets. So if later in the year, maybe if as COVID kind of lightens up, we really want to do something like that in person if possible, but we can set up a meeting where we get local farmers and food service directors together in a room, and we can, make connections. Intentional production planning with farmers prior to bid development and or menu planning. So this is another thing we can help with. Set up a roundtable discussion of talking to the growers. What products do you need? What products are you looking to get to source local and fresh? And working with the farmers again, if they know that in advance, they can plan properly, and both the schools and the farmer can be successful. So let us know how we can help. If there's other products you wish you could get that you aren't getting now that are New York, please drop those in the chat. We'd love to hear the kinds of things that you're looking for. Okay, next slide. So as we mentioned, we have some upcoming trainings coming about. The next training is going to be increasing local procurement, and that is on December 7th. Wait, let me just double check to make sure that I have the date right, because after December 2nd, excuse me. Nope, December 7th, I was correct. So December 7th from 1 to 2 o'clock is going to be increasing local procurement. It's going to be very similar to this training. So if you attended this training, really, there's no need to attend the increasing local procurement unless you really want to. The same material is going to be covered. We have the geographic preference on November 14th, and then we have the local harvest celebration presentation or workshop on November 16th. So those are some that we have planned. We're looking forward to putting together any other upcoming trainings that anybody might find useful. So again, please reach out if you have any ideas on what you want more information on, and we'll be happy to put together a training on that. We also offer one-on-one consulting sessions. So reach out to Amy, Miranda, or myself if you're looking for more information. You want us to go through your menu, help find substitutions, think about featuring a protein, and talk about how to procure those things, both from the bidding side and from the available products sold by vendors. So please reach out to us. We're here to help. We want to help. We're excited to help. Amy, Miranda, and I are pretty new to this role, and we're really excited to get started, especially in this new time where the 30% initiative is more attainable for Long Island now that we can get New York milk. So
Sandy, real quick, sorry, you said November. November flew off our calendars. They're December.
December.
The
I'm
December.
sorry. So
I'm like, wait a
December-
minute, what month are we in?
So December 7th, December 14th, and December 16th are the next workshops. And it's going to be the increasing local procurement, geographic preference, and then local food celebrations, respectively. We will, after this webinar, we'll send a follow-up email where you guys will get resources available to you. There'll be a list of those. You'll have a link to the recording. You will have, I'll send the links to the other webinars as well. So that's kind of it from our end. We'll open it now to questions if anybody has any at this time.
Sandy, you have a good one from Reagan in here that I suspect others might be interested in. So I think we still have Michelle and Tara, at least it looks like we do. It says, I did divert some potatoes to New York State, but they became unavailable. But that leads me to my next question. Can we use direct diversion items for the New York State 30%? Michelle and Tara, if we still have you, do you want to answer that one officially?
Hi, we're still on. I just wasn't sure, are the potatoes commodities? Is that what she's saying? And then she took those and diverted them?
Reagan, feel free to go off mute too, if you want to,
Okay,
and just ask the question. Yeah.
thank you so much. So I diverted part of my potato, the commodity, to a company who had New York State potatoes available, French fries. I did get 1 or 2 shipments in this year, but then they became unavailable. But because that's a partial use of commodity money, does that not count?
I assume you're talking about McCain's, right? The French fry?
Yes.
Yeah, so if it's a commodity, you can't use that because it's at no cost to you.
Well, there is a cost. It's just a reduced cost because I diverted some potatoes to McCain's.
Yeah, so you can't use the cost of the potatoes, but if there's any additional like processing fees or shipping, storage, or delivery fees, those can be included if the potatoes are New York State and you use them at lunch. It's just the cost of the actual potatoes wouldn't count.
Right.
Because you're getting them through commodity dollars.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm still a little confused because I get a reduced price for that item. I don't, I still pay.
For like the processing, Regan, and all the different, like the processing shit, like from McCain's, like they get your potatoes and then you pay McCain's something to turn them into a French fry, right?
Yeah.
Right, but the potatoes itself is all commodity, right?
Yes.
You're not getting it.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yep, so
Gotcha.
so it's just the actual potatoes that you want to be able to use, but the other fees that you could do that part.
Okay, thank
But
you.
Reagan, if you have questions, you can reach out. We can talk a little bit further about it if you want.
Yes, I will. I definitely in the future. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and McCain's did let us know they discontinued that just due to a lack of demand. I suspect it had to do with the pandemic and folks just not serving up hot French fries, basically when they dropped that New York State line. They did say if there's enough demand that comes back, it's something they could put back in like to production, like that New York State potato, that New York State French fries. So that was an unfortunate thing that happened within the last few months that we found out about. But if and when that demand comes back online, like I said, they'd be willing to consider producing it again.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, any last questions from anybody? If not, we'll wrap it up since we're at 2:30 and I don't want to take up any more time. Okay, well, again, thank you everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Reach out if you have any further questions, and then hopefully we'll see some of you guys on some of our other workshops that are scheduled for later in December.
Thank you.
Mhm.